Hey everyone, how's it going? Welcome. This is the first video in a series that I'm going to be making that's highlighting the different decks that are available to play in Riftbound and that seem to be popular at the moment. Um, Not sure how this series is going to evolve. There's going to be no gameplay in this video. This is just going to be sort of a presentation breaking down the deck, the cards, the strategy, mulligans, all that good stuff, and me talking about my experience with the deck and how I've found success. So this will be good for both beginners and experienced players. We're going to go through the whole deck, give you guys a chance to see everything that's going on, and then the different things you need to watch out for in certain matchups, and just give you a good idea of how this deck is played and what you should be expecting when running this deck. In the future, if there's any other decks you guys want to see, just let me know. Right, I'm just gonna be going through the decks that I'm playing at the moment, have experience with, and I'm sure these videos will get better as we go on, as I get more experience. I mean, right now, as of now, the card game is not out yet. Still have about 2 months before that happens. So the meta is going to be evolving, the play style is going to be evolving. What may seem strong right now might not be so strong later. We're just going to have to see. But without further ado, let's get into this. So, as you can see, we're going to be talking about Viktor today. So, Viktor, there we go. Viktor is a token deck. And so what we're going to be covering in this presentation is we're going to do a high-level overview of the deck as a whole, go over the legend and champion, the general strategy for the deck, going to give you guys the deck list, highlight the cards in the deck list, and then show you guys what my sideboard looks like, as well as some potential alternatives. At the end, we will briefly go over some of the matchups and whether they're favorable, unfavorable, in my experience, what we want to be mulliganing, and just overall what I've thought while playing through this deck. So here's the quick deck overview. I'm not really going to go too much. You can feel free to pause the video, take a look at this. As you can see, it's a pretty strong early to mid game tempo-y deck. You're always going to be playing something. We're pretty much never going to have any turns where we don't play a single card. And all this is available on Piltover Archive. This is just what they show, the graphs they show you when you make a deck. So very easy there. And I'll link that in the description of the video. All right, so Viktor is a mind and body champion, blue and yellow for the runes. These is a very powerful color combination because the body runes give us access to some of the most powerful single target removal spells in the game. And blue, it just seems like every card with the mind rune is pretty powerful and is going to provide value. So two of the best colors, and I think it's a really great combination for this. It synergizes really well with Viktor. So the Viktor Legend, his ability is for 1 mana, you can tap him and play a 1 might recruit token onto the board. So that is going to stop us from ever having to pass, especially early game. Ideally in the early game we're going to be having some plays, but worst comes to worst, we'll always be able to play a 1 unit token and get a point on the board pretty early on. This also allows us to play on curve more easily with the cards, so we can round out those turns where we have odd amounts of mana by tapping this. It does allow us, obviously, to constantly generate battle pressure, and then it enables us to reinforce our battlefields that we're holding in the case where we need to just get over the edge or to bait out some removal. So, good champion, pretty straightforward. So, champion overview. We are going with the Viktor leader, and his ability is when a non-recruit unit that you control dies, we can basically replace it with a 1 might recruit token in our base. He's 4 cost, 1 power, 1 body, power rune. He's really strong. This will basically nullify our opponent's card removal if they use spells to remove some of our minions that are on the battlefield or in base. It enables us to take some very advantageous trades during showdowns. If you play this in your base, it does demand immediate removal and attention from your opponent. If they let this stay up 2-3 turns, they are going to lose the game. So can also be used as sort of a bait, if you will. Although, in general, with this card, what we want to be doing is getting immediate value from this card on the turn that we summon it. So we want to have a setup with maybe one or two non-token units in our base that we can then summon Viktor, swing with those guys, get control of the battlefield, or at least trade, and then regenerate the tokens in our base so we can do it again next turn. This sets up very strongly for a 2-turn 4-point swing, as I kind of explained there. So we can, we summon Viktor, we swing with our units, oftentimes going to be Sentry or Scout early on. We either neutralize the battlefield or we take points on both sides, splitting it, and then when those inevitably die, we then have 2 more to replace it, and then we can swing for 2 more points the next turn, which can be particularly strong when we have Stratagem in our hand, or Siphon Power, or some of the other cards we'll go up for later. So the general strategy, like I said, we want to flood the board with our early game units, and we want to use some of those early game units to give us the ability to generate more resources via card draw or channeling runes. We want to split our pressure onto multiple battlefields so that our opponent, we're going to be constantly scoring points and forcing our opponent to commit to one side or the other with units, or we're going to make them spend resources on units that don't demand some of that removal, and then that will allow us to later come in with some of our finishers and win the game. We really want to get 2 to 6, but 2 to 6, ideally 6, so we can set up for a late game swing with Stratagem or Dragon. But 2 to 6 points early on, just from splitting the battlefields, applying pressure, and we really want to play with a tempo and a cadence that has the opponent constantly needing to not only remove our units on the battlefields, but then have a plan for the units that have either replaced them via our Viktor champion or that we've summoned each turn. So we really want to keep up a high pressure on these guys. And then we want to utilize the cards from our body rune, our body color cards, to remove any of their answers via units. We want to Cull the Weak, Hidden Blade, some of those cards that have the plus might on defense that may be a little sticky to stop us. So we want to get into a situation where maybe we summon, a Soaring Scout and a Viktor token turn 1 or turn 2. And then we split them on the battlefield, get our 2 points. Our opponent summons, spends 4 mana to summon a Kaisa or something like that. We immediately remove it and then keep adding more cards, more pressure, and then they can't deal with it, and we overwhelm them. And then, as I've sort of been alluding to, we really want to set up our late game to get a 2-point swing with Grand Strategem. And so we really want to get to 6 points and then set up for that big swing to 8 points and catch our opponent off guard. So here's the deck list. You guys can pause the video, screenshot, do what you want. We are going to be going over all these cards in a second, so I'm not going to read them all out. But this is what we're working with here. All right. So the early units we've been referring to: Watchful Sentry, Ravenbloom Student, and Soaring Scout. Watchful Sentry and Scout have death knell abilities that ramp up our card draw as well as our runes. These are what we're looking to mulligan for in the early game. We want to be playing these guys. And then Ravenbloom Student is also a good card. If you get it in the opening hand, just play it. Do not worry about needing to generate the value, but it's also a good mid to late game card because we can sort of surprise them with and turn this 2 might guy into a 4 or 5 might. But we want to get these guys on the board early, establish presence on the battlefields, and make our opponent have a reaction. Viktor is a token deck, so we want to be generating tokens. These are the core cards in our deck. We want to be seeing these guys in our early hands, drawing them, playing them all the time. Faithful Manufactor, when you play me, play a 1 might recruit token here. This is an excellent turn 2 play. If we are going second, we can put this down, immediately have a chance to get 2 points the next turn, swing on an open battlefield. Noxian Drummer, great with the battlefield. Trifarian War Camp, Siphon Power, nice 4-point swing for very little. And then Vanguard Captain will combo really, really well on turns like 2 to 4 when we play something like a Soaring Scout and the Vanguard Captain, or a removal spell in the Vanguard Captain, or we can even reinforce a battlefield with it. We're looking at a very cheap, immediate 5 might swing with these cards. So these are the bread and butter of our deck. So the removal that I've alluded to, Cull of the Weak and Hidden Blade in particular, are probably two of the strongest single target removal cards in the entire game. They're both 2 cost, 1 power removal, targeted removal, and this is how we destroy decks like Set, Master Yi, Volley Bear. They, as soon as they get a big unit on the board, we remove it immediately, give them a little card draw. In the case of Hidden Blade, or with Cull of the Weak, we can very easily summon a Viktor token, sacrifice a 1 unit token, or a 1 might token to trade with maybe a 4 or 5 might unit they have on board. Falling Comet, I've found to be very nice in the mid to late game. Let's say we have gotten our 4, 5, 6 points early on from our small guys, but they maybe have managed to stabilize with, like Faithful Watcher or some of these mid-rangey type units. We can Falling Comet them if they don't expect it with our early game pressure. They don't really, especially if we've used a Hidden Blade or Cull, they do not expect it. It's just a great, most champion units are about 5 to 6 might, so this is great for removing that, swinging that. And it doesn't, there's no recycle cost, so that's nice too. And then our big units, we have Cruel Patron. Obviously, really good synergy with the Viktor hero power. 4 cost, 6 might. That's pretty hard to beat. Pretty great value there. Harness Dragon, really good late game finisher, especially if we're on 6, 7 points. Our opponent finally lays down a large unit, thinks they have control of that battlefield because maybe we only have 1 or 2 small guys in base. Good removal. It's not a spell, so like the green can't counter it with counterspell or some of their other stuff. It's just good direct removal, and it also puts a big body on the board. So these are sort of our closers. Cruel Patron will come out earlier a lot of times. We're probably never going to be keeping these guys in our opening hand, but they are good finishers, and sometimes this will catch people off guard because they see us spamming these early units, these low-cost units early on. They're maybe not expecting us to have this much fuel for the late game to finish out. So these are our finishers, and then I just threw the card draw on there. Consult the Past, 4 mana, draw 2. Easy card. It can be hidden, so it can be a one recycle cost or power cost. I'm not sure the terminology. That we can put down on a battlefield, and a lot of times our opponents might get scared into thinking that's Hidden Blade. So you can play some mind games with that, but that's just to get us some card draw in the late game to hopefully allow us to draw our cards like Stratagem or Dragon. But our swing cards, Siphon Power, really powerful between turns, I'd say like 3 to 5 when we're, our opponents put down maybe like a 4 cost card, or they're playing a token deck similar to us. We choose a battlefield, and every single one of our friendly units gets +1 might, and our opponents get -1 might. Very powerful, very cheap surprise card, and it has reaction, so we can also use it to defend. Good, powerful spell. Use it for swings in the mid game to take control of battlefields. And then Grand Strategem. This card is what the entire deck revolves around. It is an action. Give friendly units +5 might this turn. I have used this in swings, and I've literally gotten to like 50 might on a battlefield. This very fast, very quickly turns, 3 1/1 tokens into 18 might and 2 points, and oftentimes is what we use to finish the game. So when you're playing this deck, we're making very straightforward plays to get our 4 to 6 points, and then we want to come in with the surprise finisher of Grand Strategem and finish out the game by having surprise large swing there. It is 6 cost, 3 power, so it really will set you back in the mana. So be prepared to use this. If you're using this early just to get your third or fourth point, you have to do some math in your head and think about the matchup and the cards and think about how you're going to get these points later on, because this really will set you back mana wise. But if it's in the end game and this is how we're choosing to close it out, then we don't care about our recycled mana at that point. This is the sideboard I've been using when doing it. I've been running 3 copies of Stupefy, 3 copies of Salvage, 2 copies of Back-to-Back. Stupefy, you want to tech this card in if you're playing against an aggro deck or just a deck where they are contesting with early game units like Poro or like the Clockwork Watcher, where I think he's like a 2-3 cost draw card, 2 might, cards like that where we can make ideal trades with our 1 power tokens. We want to be getting more value out of, if we need to get more value out of our 1 power tokens or our 1 might tokens, this is a good card to tech in. I found it very useful, this card, against like the Darius token decks or with the gear decks where they're constantly summoning. It's like the guys that are 2 might or 3 might. Those decks we do struggle against because we're more of a 1 might guys that want to split the field early. So if we're dealing with sort of that aggressive to mid-range type deck, this is a good way to even the playing field, get us some card draw. Salvage, pretty straightforward. If we're playing a deck that revolves around gear, Jinx, Darius, something like that, this can immediately win us the game. We're looking for it in the mulligan. Back-to-back, I found very useful against sort of mid-range control-y decks, or even against other early game decks, because it can give us that surprise might increase, and that can allow us to get over the hump against some of these sort of small to medium sized units that our recruits would not be able to get over by themselves. Yeah, pretty straightforward. Some potential substitutions. For a while, I was running Daring Poro over Ravenbloom Student because I didn't find myself getting that much value with the Ravenbloom Student's abilities. Overall, I think as I've played more games, I decided I like Ravenbloom more. But if you are making some of these other substitutions with the other cards here, and maybe you're substituting out some of those spells, then Poro might get you more value the less spells you have in this deck. I have not found situations where I've wanted to sub in any of these guys, but I do think they all have their place. One disadvantage of this deck, like for example, where I think Vanguard Attendant could come in, is the deck by itself does not have any cards that immediately enter ready and can get you that last point you need if your deck gets board wiped or something. So Vanguard Attendant could be a good finisher that you could replace Dragon with. King's Edict, obviously any card where we're choosing to sacrifice one of our own minions, there's very few decks where our card will get less value from killing an opponent's minion, giving up one of our own. That's why Cull of the Weak is so powerful, because oftentimes we're giving up a 1 might recruit token to destroy their only minion or one of their 2 big minions. And then lastly, Machine Evangel. It's always good to generate more tokens, so if you find that you want to play this deck in a more mid-rangey style, that could be for you. But I have not really used any of these cards in the deck except for Daring Poro, which I overall preferred Ravenbloom more. So I've played about 50 to 70 games of this deck, and this is roughly what I found to be favorable and unfavorable matchups. As you may have guessed, we're pretty favorable against decks that want to summon really big units. So Master Yi, Set, Volibear, Lee Sin, even Leona to an extent. I know her champion unit is like in 6 or an 8 that comes in ready when the opponent's got like 3 points left to get. The reason why is because we have incredible single target removal, right? And that it doesn't cost that much mana, so we can oftentimes sacrifice very little or nothing at all to get rid of their only answers. And then when we get rid of that, we're still racking up points because we've split our units onto both battlefields, and we're racking up 2 points a turn, putting up pressure on our opponent. Some of the unfavorable or even really neutral matchups I found, Kaisa, obviously, Akathian Rain over here, absolutely decimates us. So that is a card you have to play around if you are seeing a Kaisa in your games. I will say most Kaisas are not running Akathian Rain in their main deck. It's usually a side deck card, so I think you can be more aggressive with loading your area with the tokens and the cards in game one against Kaisa. But when they do go to the sideboard, inevitably, you need to be careful of this card. Ari, her champion, the champion unit with her, where she can choose to give units -2 might. This particular unit -2 might is very powerful against us. She also can use her charm spells, Wind Wall, Zonia's Hourglass. Those cards can put a lot of can make it really difficult for us to get points because she can often hold one battlefield with like a 4 might unit, which will make it hard for us to get those points early. We might only be getting one early, and we don't have enough might to get over the hump to kill her. So if we don't draw removal, that's tough. Having said that, if we do draw our removal, sometimes we can just out-tempo her and then win with a dragon or a stratagem at the very end. Teemo's an interesting one. I have not had that many games against Teemo, and I'd be lying if I said I, knew that deck list by heart. But Teemo's ability to be played from the hand and like deal 2 damage to a unit can hurt a lot, and they also have that sort of mechanic where they go through their deck, and if they look like one of the top 5 cards of their deck is Nocturne, he comes in for free and he's like a 4 might, so that gets pretty annoying and gets pretty hard to deal with because we don't get that much value out of our Cull of the Weak or our Hidden Blade, so that deck has been struggled. Darius, in particular, the gear-based Darius deck where they summon a bunch of units has been tough to deal with because we are really good at summoning 1/1s, 2/2s, 3, or I keep saying 2/2s, 1 might, 2 might, 3 might units. He can get a lot of 2, 3, 4 might units out for pretty much nothing. And then he also has the ability to tap himself to help out generate that stuff. His Legion ability is lethal, so we almost get out-tempoed by Darius at times because if we use our removal, we don't get enough value from it, and then he's just generating more higher value cards than we are at that 2 to 3 cost. And then Annie, I think Annie, I kind of just see her as a less good Kaisa, if I'm being honest, but even a less good Kaisa still has a lot of removal and answers to our tokens. So another deck I forgot to include was Jinx. Jinx is hit or miss, that's sort of what you get with combo decks. I've had games where I've sort of run over a Jinx and they haven't played a single card, and then I've also had games where the Jinx has just sort of talked at me for 25 minutes while they play 80 cards in a turn, wipe my board, destroy every unit, and have, like a 5/5 on the board for some reason. So I would say probably overall unfavorable matchup with Jinx, but again, really early days, and even though I played 50 to 70 games, that still is only like 4 or 5 matches for each of these guys. So if you have had a different experience, let me know in the comments. I'm sure we'll see how it performs as time goes on and we get more data to look at. So, general mulligan strategy. In general, we do want to go first almost always with this deck because we want to apply that pressure early. We don't want to give our opponents a chance to catch up or to prepare defenses for our initial onslaught. We are looking for at least one of the Soaring Scout, Watchful Sentry, or Ravenbloom Student, just so we can get that early pressure on the board. And then we would really like a turn 2 token generator so that we can apply more pressure and sort of increase the power on our board. In general, I would like to keep at least one removal card so that we can answer. Usually every deck we play against is going to have at least some sort of answer on turn 2, at the latest turn 3. With just sort of one of those 3 to 5 might cards. If we can use a removal on that or get their champion unit out of the way early, we can oftentimes disrupt and get too far ahead for them to be able to stabilize and catch up in time. And if it is like a game 2 to 3 situation, we've gone to our sideboard, we definitely want to be looking for those cards because we brought them in for a reason, right? So if we brought in the Salvage for the gear decks, we want to be looking for Salvage so we can get rid of their gear. So relatively straightforward there. Just like an example of like a dream opening hand is like something like this. Let's say we're going first. We play Soaring Scout or Watchful Sentry, turn 1, easy. Turn 2, Faithful Manufactor and a recruit token from Viktor. Next turn, use our Hidden Blade to remove whatever unit they've played, add the Soaring Scout, another Viktor token, move forward there. Maybe we've drawn some of our Cruel Patrons, our Harness Dragons. We're setting up for that play down the line. But we want to be getting stuff out on the board turns 1, 2, and 3 for sure. So, just my overall experience with the deck. It is a straightforward deck, and I do think it's very fun to play. It's nice to be able to be playing stuff every turn and be the aggressor and control the tempo of the game. I think this is a very good first deck to play with Riftbound. This is the deck I've been playing to learn the game, to get used to Tabletop Simulator, to get used to tournament formats. That's not to say there aren't tough choices, because there is a lot of, you need to still have the knowledge of your opponent's deck, of what removal they have, if they have board wipes, when to go for your big swings with Siphon Power and Grand Strategem, what cards the removal is worth using on. So you still do have to think, but at the same time, I think it's sort of a situation where it's got a low skill floor where anyone can play it, and then still a relatively high skill ceiling to where advanced and experienced players can still get enjoyment out of playing this. One thing I really like about this deck is it seems like you can always win a game no matter what matchup you're against. There's certain decks like Kaisa where if you match up against like a set while playing Kaisa, like, good luck, mate. Like, that you're probably just wraps on that, no shot. But even in our unfavorable matchups, like decks like Ari or Kaisa, we still have chances to outskill, outplay, or just, outdraw our opponent and win those games. It's easy, right? You put guys on the board and you put guys on the battlefield, you're going to score points. So you're always giving yourself a chance to win there. This deck is hard to come back with and win if you lose board control. If you don't play around that Akathian Rain, that not Falling Comet, some of those red cards with the removal where they split damage or do that, it's going to be hard to get your tempo back and be able to win the game. So you need to take that into account when you take your battlefields, when to retreat, when to commit to an attack, what you think the opponent will have as reactions and showdowns. We really don't want to be making mistakes with that. So we need to be confident when we take control, when we commit to a play, because if we lose our board, we probably will lose the game. This deck plays with a cadence. There is a certain tone and cadence at which you play the deck, and I think, if we're going like psychologically real quick, there is a cadence at which you should play this deck in a real life tournament setting, like your Friday Night Magic equivalent, sort of. We can make the opponent feel like we're running out of time just by the way we play cards, we conduct our turn. There is some real psychology to that, and we really can make our opponents feel like we are controlling the game and they have to react to us, and it's just another added pressure we can add in their head. We really do need to know what removal our opponent has access to, because different colors, different rune type, and the different rune types have very different ways we're going to play around it. So, for example, red, we know that the sort of Fury rune type has the ability to remove units that are in our base and not on the battlefield, right? So we do not want to be playing Viktor the turn before we make a huge swing against a Fury deck, because they will just immediately destroy us. Same with blue. They'll eliminate our value from that. But against other decks, like other body decks or green decks, I don't know why I can't think of what the green rune is, we can, play Viktor in our base because they have removal that's targeted towards the battlefield, or that allows us to choose which unit to die. So we can sort of leave Viktor out there for longer and set up for plays down the line. So just knowing what removal our opponent has is going to be a big deal into determining what we do. And then lastly, kind of gone over this, but we really do need to get great value out of Viktor in matches that go longer. In matches where we are only able to get 3 to 4 points as opposed to 4 to 6 points in the first 5 turns, Viktor is going to be the way we win the game, because we're going to want to get our points from our non-token units in that first showdown, and then when we recharge with Viktor and swing again, that is where we're going to get our points after that with our stratagem plays. So if we play Viktor and we do not get value out of him, or we don't get enough value out of him, we're cooked. So keep that in mind. That's one of the hardest decisions of playing this deck, is when to summon Viktor, when to go for that swing. And I think that's all I got. Yeah, that's the last slide. So again, just like as a recap, Viktor, very fun token deck that gives you access to a lot of good early game units, very effective single target removal, and then great finishers with Grand Strategem and the Dragon. So let me know what you guys think of this deck. I'll link the TTS code in the description of the video, but I've been enjoying this deck a lot. If you've got a friend you want to get into Riftbound, I think this is a very good first deck, sort of beginner deck to play with, and I'm excited to see how it shapes up in the meta. I have a feeling it's going to end up right. I think when the game first came out and the cards released, people were saying this was an A or an S tier deck. I disagree. I would say this is more of a B to A tier deck, and I think it's going to get weaker as the game goes on, just because it is natural in card games that aggressive, straightforward decks are stronger at the beginning of games because people haven't figured out the game yet. So the more straightforward and just sort of put units on the board a deck is, the better it's going to perform. I do think as more cards come out, as people get better at the game and better at crafting decks, there are going to be more decks with answers to this. But I think for when these, the set drops in October or on end of October, I think this is a great deck to bring to that first month of your local card game shops, tournaments, and stuff. I think as this is going to be very strong early on, and maybe even later, and we'll see how it adapts, and we get more cards and deal with stuff. But again, I think this is a strong deck. I think you can win this deck, and as I alluded to, this deck always gives you a fighting chance. So, yeah, that's all I got for you. Let me know what you guys thought, if there's any changes I should make to this style of video. I do think in the future I'll upload just some games of me playing this deck so you can get a feel of how it will be like over Tabletop Simulator and in real life. But hope you guys enjoyed. Like, comment, and subscribe, all that good stuff. And then, yeah, catch you all on the next one.